Hello everybody. So in the last tutorial, I showed you guys how to add your roof and then also how to add furniture into your model. In this tutorial, what I want to cover is how to add lights to your model and also how to get started with rendering. So the first thing I want to do is go to my ceiling plan level 1, and I'm going to begin to import lighting fixtures into my model. One other thing that's really cool in Revit is when you guys are looking at your ceiling plans, you can also choose to create an underlay that allows you to see that floor plan beneath. So it's really convenient if you guys are trying to place certain lighting fixtures over particular furniture pieces. So in this case, to get that underlay, I'm just going to go to Properties, go all the way down to Underlay, go over to None, and click in that box. Once I click in there, I'm actually going to click on the drop down and choose what underlay I want to see. So in this case, because I'm working on my level 1, I want to see that level 1 floor plan beneath. So I'm going to choose level 1 and hit apply. And you guys can see that that furniture that I have in level 1 appears in that ceiling plan as well. Okay. So to begin importing lighting fixtures, you guys want to be in your Architecture tab. From there, you want to scroll over to Component and click down on your options. From here, I want to go to Place a Component. And it will pretty much work the same way as when we imported our furniture, furniture blocks that Revit has available for us. So in this case, we're going to go back to Place a Component. Once we're in Place a Component, we're going to go to Load Family. Once you go to Load Family, you guys will have a dialog box that appears that goes through all of the pre-made blocks that Revit has available. So in this case, because we're bringing in a lighting fixture, we're going to find our folder that says lighting, and we're just going to click on there, and then we're going to go to architectural. And in this case, because I'm importing lighting fixtures into the interior of my home, I just want to make sure to go to that one. Similar to the furniture, if you guys click on those lighting fixtures, it will give you kind of a preview of what that will look like or project in your model. So in this case, I'm going to import a couple of downlight recessed cans, and I also will come back and import some of the pendant light hemisphere fixtures as well. One other thing that I talked about in class was your option to put in studio lights. Just briefly, just to touch on that again, your studio light will allow you to place a overall light within your area without actually having a fixture that it needs to be attached to. So if you guys are finding that your models are coming out pretty dark and your light that you have in that space isn't efficient enough, you guys can just come in, add a studio light to it, and that will definitely brighten up your space. Okay, so I'm going to go back up to my downlight recessed can. I'm going to click on that option and press open. Again, similar to your furniture, that piece will appear on your cursor and you can begin to place that where you want those elements to go. So in this case, I will place one here, and I will just do 2 rows of recessed can lighting. Once I get that, I'm just going to hit modify, and that will take me out of that tool. One thing I want you guys to notice is that when you are placing your lighting fixtures, when you first bring them in, Revit will give you a option to actually change what you want that height to be. So you just want to make sure that you set that height to the height of your ceiling. Okay. So now I'm going to go back into that place a component option and import now one of the pendant lights that I talked about previously. So I'm going to go to lighting, architectural, internal, and I'm going to go down to pendant light hemisphere. I'm going to select it again. Go to open. And this is what I mean when I say Revit will give you an option on where you want the elevation of that to be. So in this case, before I even place this pendant into my actual space, I just want to look to see what that elevation looks like. In this case, I know that my ceiling heights are around 10 feet. So I want to just make sure that I edit this elevation and take that to what the height of my ceiling will be. So in this case, I'm just going to do 10 feet and press enter. And now I'm going to begin to place that into my model. And in this case, I will just do 2 of these just so you guys get the idea of it. Actually, let's just place one. I'm just going to place one here in the center. Okay, and I'm going to delete that one out. Okay, so now I have effectively placed lighting into my model. So in order to see that in 3D, just to make sure that those came in correctly for you, you'll just want to create a camera view. And again, we're just going to go to our view tab, select, go to 3D view, click down on our options and go to camera. I'm going to select camera. Remember that first click will anchor your camera into your space. So that first click will anchor it, and that second click will move it into that direction that I want it. So you want to click once and you want to take your cursor out in the direction that you want to look. And I always say just take it and spread it out far beyond your model just to make sure that you get a pretty good perception in your 3D space. So I'm going to click. And I probably should have created that camera on the first floor. So let's actually go to level 1 and let's recreate that camera again. So view, 3D view, click down on your options, go to camera. Again, I'm going to click one time to anchor it. And then I'm going to move my cursor in the direction that I want to look. Once I have that direction, I'm just going to span it out again, pretty far out there, and click that second time. Okay, and I'm just going to use my circles, my blue dots, to move and modify my actual viewport, just to get more of that space in my view. Okay. Okay, so right now I'm looking at this, and again I can see my lights that I've placed and that pendant that I placed. So I'm good. So that is how you guys will upload your lighting into your actual plans. So you always, again, just as quick reminders, you want to make sure that when you're placing your lights that you're in one of your ceiling plans. And once you're in your ceiling plan, if you want to know where you're actually placing that over your furniture, you just want to make sure to edit your underlay, and that will allow you to see that furniture beneath. Okay, so now I want to shift gears and start to talk a little bit about rendering. So to get started with your rendering, you want to go to one of your 3D views. Revit will not render if you're not in one of your 3D camera views that you created. So even now, we don't even have the option under our view tab to go to render. And that's just because we're not in one of our 3D camera views. So I'm going to go back to my view 7, which was the last one that I created. And once I go to that 3D view, we'll see that render button become available to us. So again, I'm going to go to my view tab. Once I'm in my view tab, I'm going to go ahead and hit render. Once you hit render, you will see a dialog box come up. A couple of things I want you to pay attention to when you're trying to begin rendering is this first portion is your quality area. Now you have the option underneath settings, if you click down on your options, to choose how you want your rendering to come out, what you want that quality to be. What I normally say as a rule of thumb, if you're just starting off with your rendering and your model isn't actually complete, you just want to see how those materials are coming in and just to make sure that they're being applied correctly, I would say stay in either your draft or your low. Okay, because the higher you get on your spectrum, the longer it will take for your rendering to complete. So I just normally keep this at either draft or low. In this case, I'll go ahead and do low. That's fine. I don't think it'll take too long to render. So I'm going to go to low. Now, one thing I want to reiterate, because I had a lot of questions on this in class, is if you are in one of your lower settings for quality, it will not look as good as if you were in your high or your best. So you may get areas in your draft or your low where it kind of looks like it's very pixelated, or even when you have shadows or lights that's shining down on particular furniture pieces or a particular area of your room, those may show up as white dots, but that's just because you're in your lower quality. When you get up to your high or your best, or even if we begin to do some custom settings here, those those white dots, that you have will start to just appear as solid shines of light. And that may come from your setting of having your sun coming through your window. That may be from even some of the lights that you've placed in your model. So it will get better as you begin to play with those higher quality settings that you have. Again, you want to just stay in draft or low if you're just doing something really quick and just trying to see if those materials are being applied. Okay. The next thing I want to look at is our output settings. Now, once we actually hit render, you have the option to render this on your screen, which is what I recommend so that you can see it, or you have the option to export that out to a printer. In this case, I say 9 times out of 10, go ahead and leave it at your screen because we can always export it out. And we can talk about that once we actually get a rendering in our scene. So go ahead and leave that at scene. The next area you guys have is your lighting. Now, if you go to your scheme and you click down in your options, you have a couple options that you can play around with. You have your exterior options, which give you your sun only, your sun and artificial, and your artificial only. You only want to play around with this exterior lighting if you are rendering your building from the outside view. If you're dealing with your interior section, you want to deal with your interior portion of it. So you want to select from these bottom 3 options. Your sun only will turn off any artificial lights that you have in your model. So we will only be able to see light coming from this window. In my view, it will turn off my pendants, and it will also turn off my my pendant, and my recessed can lights. If you choose to do sun and artificial, It will render with both your sunlight coming through your windows that you have, as well as the in my case, my downlighting and my pendants. You also have the option to do your artificial lighting, which will only render with your artificial lights on. So it won't give you any daylighting in your scene at all when it renders. So my rule of thumb is just to kind of play around and see what gives you the best rendering, because it's all about how to get it to look as realistic and as great on the screen as possible. So it may, depending on the scene that you're rendering, it may look better if you only do artificial lighting, or if you only do this, only do the sun and artificial. It would just depend on the scene that you're trying to create. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and take mine to sun and artificial and see what that comes out as, and then we can go back and always look at it in just artificial lighting as well. So I'm going to take that to sun and artificial. The other thing that you guys have the option to do is turn off particular lights. So if I click on artificial lights, it brings up another dialog box where I can choose out of all of the artificial lights that I have in my scene if I want to turn off particular ones. So right now I have 8 recessed can lights in my scene, and I have 1 pendant. So if I wanted to, I can just choose to turn that pendant off, and you guys see it highlighted, and it will only render those artificial lights of the recessed cans without that pendant light on. So I'm going to go ahead and leave mine on, but just know that you guys have that option. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press OK to get back to where I was. Another thing you guys have that's kind of a pretty cool feature is you can choose your background. So it just allows you to select if you're using like your sun in your scene, if you want your sun to come through just full force, if you want your sky to have a few clouds, or if you want it to be a cloudy day, that will, as you guys know, just in reality affect how much sun comes through a particular window in your home. So that's all that setting will do. I will go ahead and leave mine at few clouds, but you guys can kind of play around with that and see what type of effect that has on the rendering that you produce. Alright, so now that I have all of my settings where I want them, just to see a quick rendering, I'm going to go ahead and press render. Once you hit render, it will tell you about how much time it's going to take to render that. It will also tell you how many artificial lights you have that's coming into that you have rendering. So we placed 8 can lights. We also placed our pendant. So that's kind of what that information is saying. You may also too get a warning depending on the material that you've chosen. So right now Revit is telling me that one of the images for my chair fabric is missing. So if you guys are creating custom materials, which we'll go over, you just want to make sure to keep that in a particular folder so that Revit can pull that every time you open up your model. So that's all that warning is telling me. Okay, so we will just wait until this renders. Again, the higher quality you have that you're trying to render, the more time it will take to render your actual image. Okay, so we will just wait for this to render, and we will talk more about it once we have it there. Okay, so this is the rendering that Revit comes out with. Remember, again, this is a very low quality rendering because of the setting that I selected. Again, when I talked about your white dots that may appear on your furniture, so here we have some here, we also have some here, that reflects light that's coming into this space. But once you guys go to those higher qualities, this will just appear as just a single unit of light that's glaring on a particular furniture piece, just like we see in reality. Okay, so obviously this looks very rough. There's not really a lot of paint colors or changes in the materials, but this will get the point across for the next purpose that I want to talk about. So we didn't really deal with this image portion before we rendered. I want to deal with that now. So once you guys actually have a rendering done, you can still make adjustments to this rendering just by going to image and going to adjust exposure. Once I go here, I'm just going to move this box out of my way so I can still see that rendering behind. And in here, you guys can mess with some of those settings and change kind of what this looks like. So in this case, my rendering is very dark. So I'm just going to go to my exposure value and move that and make it a little bit brighter. Now, one thing you guys will notice as you're playing around with these different settings is even if you move it slightly, it can make a huge difference in the quality of your rendering. So I normally say, you know, don't do a very full shift. Just kind of go really slightly in the values that you change in this particular area. So I'm going to try to make this a little brighter, and I'm going to hit apply. And we really didn't see any changes, so I'm going to take it up just slightly a little bit more. So I'm going to take it there and hit apply, and it will adjust in real time what that will look like with this adjustment. Okay, so that's still a little very bright because of the windows that I have, so I'm just going to make it a little darker again and hit apply. I can also mess with how my highlights are coming in. So your highlights is going to be those areas here where you have a lot of sun coming into your area. Also, when you have your pendant here that's producing that uplight, we see a really pretty clear highlight here as well. So we can choose to darken those highlights, and you kind of see it kind of becomes a little better here, and then also in this area as well. You also can mess around with your mid-tones. You can mess around with your shadows, your white point. You can mess around with your saturation, which will change how grayed out or how intense your color is. So if I change that slightly and hit apply, you can see that those colors that I have in my model start to become very, very intense and defined. So I just want you guys, when you get something in your actual rendering, just to kind of play around with these options and see again what gives you the best result. Remember that when you guys are doing a rendering, it's all about trying to get it to look as realistic and as detailed as possible, because that's going to give you the best high quality of a rendering. So it's all about getting it to look correct on your screen. So this option that you have here under your adjust exposure will allow you a lot of options to kind of really make that rendering look its best. So I would definitely say it's worth utilizing when you guys go in here and start playing around. Okay, so once you make all of your adjustments, you can just press OK. And once you have this rendering, let's just pretend for a second that everything's perfect in this rendering. My color's good. I have all of my details in this rendering, and I'm ready to export this as a JPEG. You just want to click on export. And one tip that I gave in class is I would say go ahead and export first before you save to project. It just keeps it more organized, and it actually takes out a more high quality JPEG if you export it versus trying to save it to a project and then print it from there from a sheet. So always just export your images. It's going to give you a better result. So I'm just going to go to export. And then you have the option to save that wherever. So I'm just going to save this one to my desktop and hit save. That's saved now to my desktop. And I'm also going to save it to my project so that I can go back and look at that whenever and compare renderings as I continue to go and improve on this scene that I have here. So I'm going to also save to project, and it's going to ask me what name I want to save it under. You guys can change this to maybe like front room or whatever that scene you're trying to render. So in this case, I'm just going to save it to front room and press OK. And I'm going to go ahead and just exit out this rendering box. Once you exit out, it'll just go back to your normal scene. So it's really important to make sure that you export out and you save this render into your project, just so that you don't lose, if you're doing one of your best or your high quality scenes, you don't lose any of that information and you don't lose that scene and have to do it over again. So just as a quick example, when I talked about just exporting it out. So if I go to my scene here, it's now where I saved it. So I can double click on that, and it's simply just a JPEG of that scene again. Okay. If you guys want to look at this again in your actual project, where that saves that at, again, it's going to be under your project browser. You're going to scroll all the way down, and you now have a section called renderings, and you just want to hit that plus sign next to your renderings. Click on that, and that's going to be your front room rendering, and you can just click on that like you do any of your other titles, and it'll bring up that image for you. Okay. So that is the gist, the foundation of creating lights in your scene, as well as getting started with renderings. Just to reiterate again, your renderings, it's all about the details. So as many details as you can add to your particular scene to make it look as realistic, to make it look really great. Please practice on doing that. You want to just add all of those small details. They're really going to make a difference to make sure that you produce something that's really high quality and that really looks realistic when one of your viewers are looking at it. So you want to just practice as much as possible and perfect your rendering, because that's going to give you a really good option when you're using Revit to be able to create something that you could export out and you know that it's quality work. So practice, practice, practice makes perfect. And I will see you guys in class, and also see you guys on the next tutorial.